Chapter 604. But this was not the most frightening thing. The most frightening thing was that these Irai elephants were completely unaffected by the weakening effects of the bane of the battlefield halo. At this moment, they had become the sharpest weapons the Mengshi, Yusang armies were using to break the formation. With a deafening roar, two massive elephant hooves rose into the air and stomped down on the Annam Protectorate on the edge of the battle line. Their faces were brimming with fear, but in the face of these fully armored, invulnerable Irai elephants, the Annam Protectorate's resistance was negligible. As the elephants' hooves descended, the Annan Protectorate army soldiers didn't even have time to dodge, and even their armor was crushed into meat paste. The elephants raised their trunks high and began to rampage through the Tang army on the summit, none of them a match. Suddenly, a sound wave arrived, the enormous strength contained in this sound wave jolting aside the metal ornaments in the elephants' ears and blasting into their minds. But just when the elephants raised their heads in fright, a metal halberd flew through the air, stabbing deep into the elephants' eyes and into their skulls. The huge elephants' knees went soft, and they knelt heavily on the hillside. Dark red blood gushed out of their eye sockets, and then they stopped moving. Although they possessed powerful vitality and enormous strength, beasts were not humans, and the intelligence of elephants was far inferior to that of humans. In the face of top-class human experts, they were still vulnerable to a single blow. Axe, chop off the guards on the elephants' heads. The middle of the mountain was in chaos. A fully armored general was shouting at the top of his lungs, his eyes red with madness. The Annam Protectorate had never been in such a perilous situation. The lives of more than 80,000 soldiers were on the line. If they could not stop this wave of attacks, the entire Annam Protectorate would be wiped out. In order to resist this wave of attacks, all of the generals fought with all their might, using all of their strength. Elephants stabbing guards. Bang, bang. Two soldiers of the White Elephant Corps were struck by the spinning axes and dropped from the elephants' heads. A moment later, two Tang Dynasty soldiers nimbly climbed up the elephants' trunks. Squelch. Two sharp swords stabbed into the elephants' eyes. Capture them. Damn it, don't let them get away. Countless sabers, swords, and spears stabbed at the Tang Dynasty soldiers on the elephants' heads. But before they could arrive, the elephant stabbing guards immediately rolled off the elephants' corpses and vanished into the crowd. In these 5 days, Daoism Ruozhen and the Mengshi, Yusang army had truly thought of many ways to protect the elephants from the Tang, but Wang Chong had also thought of many ways to deal with the Irai elephants of Mengshi Zhao. Rumble! While the battlefield was in a stalemate, there was a massive boom from the southeast. In the most intense moment of the battle, the Mengshi, Yusang army in the southeast suddenly retreated without warning. All the Annam Protectorate soldiers were stunned, but in the heat of the battle, their bodies couldn't help but follow the pursuit. Interesting, they're copying me. On the summit, Wang Chong was surveying the battlefield. When he saw this sight, his eyes brightened and he couldn't help but laugh. This scene was incredibly similar. Daoism Ruozhen was using the methods he had used against the Mengshi Zhao army against himself. Pass on my order. Have General Luoji move to the southeast. Yes, your subordinate will go. The guards stood up and quickly left to carry out the order. Daoism Ruozhen, if you want to use my methods to deal with me, you first have to look at who your opponent is. Wang Chong's lips curled into a cold smile. For Daoism Ruozhen to be able to grasp his tactics in such a short time and train an army to deal with him was truly formidable. However, he was still far from being able to use his spear against his shield. Luoji's army was extremely skilled in offense. As long as there was the slightest opportunity, they would not let it go. If the Mengshi Yusang army revealed an opening in front of him, they would only be humiliating themselves. Wang Chong only needed a glance to know that the level of tactics the Mengshi Yusang army had displayed was absolutely incapable of dealing with a commander of Luoji's level. It was like how a bag could hold a stick but not a spear. Turning his gaze away from the southeast, Wang Chong quickly turned his attention to the north. There, an army dressed in dazzling armor of gold and white was charging through the mountains. Even the elites of the Annam Protectorate were incapable of stopping them. The Dragon Sun Corps was the most elite guard of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. Under the leadership of Crown Prince Fenjie, it displayed a terrifying offensive power. Without the protection of the giant elephant corps or the support of other armies, this corps had already pierced through more than half of the Annam Protectorate's lines. Weapons, equipment, strength, the entire Dragon Sun Corps stood at the apex of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In terms of individual strength, neither the cavalry of Uzun nor the Annam Protectorate of the Tang dynasty could compare to the Dragon Sun Corps of Mengshi Zhao. Even Wang Chang's bane of the battlefield halo was greatly weakened against them, making it far less effective than it was against other armies. The Dragon Sun Corps was the trump card of the Mengshi Zhao Empire. In the Battle of Irai, Jelifeng had used this sharp sword to pierce through the defenses of the Annam Protectorate and crush Xinyu Zhongtong. In the frenzied assault of the Mengshi Yusang army, the one that posed the greatest threat to the Tang people was not Duan Yangyan's giant elephant corps, but the Dragon Sun Corps led by Fenjie. To Wang Chong, the Dragon Sun Corps was the pawn of the Mengshi Yusang army that he wanted to eliminate the most. Begin! Wang Chong turned his head to Lin Wuxiu. This general will go. Lin Wuxiu's expression was solemn as he bowed and quickly left, vanishing from the summit. All soldiers, hear my order. Everyone, obey my orders. Anyone who falls behind will be executed. Fenjie's eyes blazed with an unprecedented fighting intent. His gaze remained fixed on the summit, and in the entire world, he could see nothing but Wang Chong. Kill him. For Jiasiluo, and for myself. Fenjie's mind was in turmoil. He was like an arrow released from a bow, never stopping until he had reached his goal. There was only one thought in his mind: eliminate Wang Chong. Crane wing formation. Advance at full speed. Fenjie unsheathed his sword, his body covered in blood as he continued forward, stepping over the corpses of the Tang dynasty soldiers. Behind him, pieces of armor seemed to have a life of their own. They broke free from the corpses and turned into iron men. Clang, clang, clang. Fenjie extended a palm, and before the Annam Protectorate soldiers could get close, their swords flew out of their hands and their armor twisted and deformed as they fell to the ground with screams. Rumble! Just as Fenjie was leading the Dragon Sun Legion in a triumphant march, the sound of galloping hooves came from behind him, accompanied by an unending stream of screams. Fenjie trembled and turned his head. He saw that a cavalry unit had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and cut Fenjie's Dragon Sun Legion in two. The cavalry of the Tang dynasty. Fenjie's pupils constricted, all the hair on his body standing on end. After fighting the Tang dynasty for so many days, Fenjie had never seen the cavalry of the Tang dynasty. The sudden appearance of this Tang dynasty cavalry was like a needle stabbed into Fenjie's heart. Retreat and defend. Fenjie's body went cold as he let out the most mournful howl he had ever let out in his life. For an army to be cut in half at the waist was an extremely dangerous signal to any soldier. If they were cut in half by the Tang dynasty, half of the Dragon Sun Legion would end up in the Tang dynasty's pocket. On the first day of the battle, Fenjie had personally witnessed the fate of the 8,000 Uzun cavalry that had fallen into the Tang dynasty's encirclement. If they could not promptly break out of the encirclement, the Dragon Sun Legion would suffer unprecedented damage since its founding. Boom! The nearly 100 metal men were the first to charge back, and then the rest of the Dragon Sun Legion followed suit. Retreat and defend. Retreat and defend. Fenjie's hoarse roar threw the entire army into chaos, but it was already too late. With a heaven-shaking roar, a unit of Tang dynasty axemen fiercely charged forward, their massive axes whistling through the air as they smashed down. Amongst the infantry, axemen were the most powerful in terms of attack power, and at the same time, they were also the best type of soldier for breaking through defenses. Fenjie had never imagined that Wang Chong would use this army to deal with him at this time. Stop them! Fenjie's eyes were wide with rage, his entire body filled with an unprecedented tension. But before all of this could begin, there was a scream as the axemen appeared and another unit of shieldmen charged out from the left. Battle cries shook the heavens and the earth. The Annam Protectorate, which had been steadily losing ground, suddenly charged from all sides, cold light flashing and a forest of swords. Not even Fenjie knew how many soldiers Wang Chong had prepared to deal with him. Success! In the midst of the chaos, the wild cheers of a Tang dynasty general suddenly came from behind him. Fenjie turned his head. To his left and right, countless soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were cooperating with the Tang dynasty cavalry. In a short period of time, they had completely surrounded and cut up the Dragon Sun Legion. Damn it, I've been tricked! Fenjie was both shocked and furious, his vision going black. He had never imagined that Wang Chong's reaction would be so swift and fierce. By the time he could react, it was already too late. This is what they call the hard but easy to break. On the summit, Wang Chong watched as the army gradually closed in and the Dragon Sun Legion fell into a tight encirclement. With a sneer, he quickly turned his attention elsewhere. In the end, Fenjie was still too young, and his attainments in the art of war were far from his own level. If one could unify the world by relying on a strong army, then wouldn't the Tang dynasty have already unified the world? What use would they have then for the art of war? The fate of the Dragon Sun Legion had already been decided. To Wang Chong, there was an even more important matter for him to complete. Careful. All soldiers on guard. Put everything on the defense. Chapter 605. Bestial and savage roars came from the base of the mountain. The earth rumbled and the heavy footsteps seemed to stomp on everyone's heart. Careful! They're coming! Stop them. We can't let them break through our defense line. At the very front of the battle line, countless soldiers stared at the massive black silhouettes emerging from the roiling dust, their palms drenched in cold sweat. After such a long time, the egg-shaking legion's giants finally rushed over. Bang! A metal cudgel as thick as a thigh howled through the air, its enormous strength sending 5 or 6 Annan Protectorate army soldiers flying. Before the rest of the soldiers could surround the cudgel, a massive arm grabbed the edge of the steel walls and fiercely pushed aside these massive weights. Aslan Kadafii Luo. Kelsalai slap. The massive and ugly sky-quaking giants uttered some inexplicable words as they charged up the mountain. Before their massive bodies, the Annam Protectorate warriors were as insignificant as ants. Bang, bang, bang. The giants charged forward. Whether it was the defense line, the walls, or the massive shields, they were all unable to withstand a single blow. One Tang soldier after another was sent flying, none of them a match for the giants. They weren't even able to slow them down in the slightest. Wherever the giants passed, the Tang people fell into chaos. The eagle. As Wang Chong gazed down the mountain at the fearsome sky-quaking giant, he suddenly said, "The sky-quaking giants are invincible. Your subordinate understands." There was no need for Wang Chong to say more. The eagle unsheathed his Wuxia steel sword and turned behind him, his expression grave. "Zhanglong, Zhao Hu, all of you follow me." As Old Eagle spoke, he mounted a warhorse and charged down the mountain. The Black Dragon Gang members followed closely behind. All the sky-quaking giants were covered in thick and sturdy floor armor, a defense that Uzun and the Arabs had jointly forged for them. In the entire army, the only weapon that could pierce through this armor was the Wuxia steel swords of Wang Chong's subordinates. The eagle's warhorse charged down from the top of the mountain, colliding with the earthquake giant at the foot of the mountain. The huge recoil threw the eagle and his warhorse into the air, but the next moment, the eagle did a somersault, the Wuxia steel sword in his hand slashing down at the giant in midair. A blood-curdling scream came from the giant's mouth. The mountainous figure was filled with terror as it staggered backward. Not far from him, an arm as thick as an adult's waist fell into the dust, blood gushing out. The eagle descended from the sky and crouched on the ground. Looking at the severed arm, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. For a moment, the mountain was deathly still. The countless giants around the eagle were staring at him, their massive eyes staring at the eagle, or more accurately, at the Wuxia steel sword in the eagle's hand. For the first time, they showed fear. This was the first time they had seen something in the hands of these weak humans that could harm them. "It seems that it's time for me to enter the stage." At the foot of the mountain, in the center of thousands of gazes, a tall and straight figure smiled and suddenly took a step forward. Rumble! The ground quaked, and dust billowed. The entire area, along with the battlefield where hundreds of thousands of soldiers were fighting, trembled violently, as if it were about to shatter. This is... Wang Chang's pupils constricted as he sensed the astonishing tremors coming from behind him. The number of people in the southwest with such a tyrannical aura could be counted on one hand. And in that direction, Wang Chong could only think of one person. Huishu Wizang. Turning his head, Wang Chong gazed toward the southwest. In the center of the earth, Wang Chong finally saw that figure. From the start of the battle until now, besides that long howl that had interrupted the Irai elephants, Huishu Wizang had not made any other attacks, nor had he revealed any of his skills or cultivation. Until this moment, boom! There was nothing in front of him, nothing at all, but the moment he saw Huishu Wizang, Wang Chong clearly sensed an enormous pressure sweeping over him like a tide. Even from a great distance, Wang Chong could still feel that oppressive pressure, that terrifying power that could explode at any moment like a raging inferno. Buzz! It was only a tiny bit of power, but Wang Chong could clearly see a vast azure light shoot up from Huishu Wizang's head. This invisible yet tangible power was like a sharp sword, stirring up the dark clouds overhead. So powerful! Wang Chang's eyes widened as he felt an unprecedented pressure. There were many legends about Huishu Wizang. Although there were many things that could not be verified, there was one thing that was beyond doubt. Huishu Wizang was an imperial great general of the Uzan Empire, a saint martial expert. Although the legends of the Tang dynasty said that of the experts of the three kingdoms, Jelifeng, Duangichuan, Huishu Wizang, and Zhangzhou Jianqiong, the strongest had to be the tiger of the empire, Zhangzhou Jianqiong, but Huishu Wizang was definitely not too far off. Alas, Zhangzhou Jianqiong isn't here. Wang Chang's heart was heavy. His father's strength was definitely not enough to contend against Huishu Wizang, and Xinyu Zhongtong was no match for Duangichuan. The two of them were still some distance away from the imperial great general level. The only thing that could make the Annam Protectorate stand against the Mengxi, Yusang army was the Tang dynasty's numerous generals and formations. This was the greatest characteristic of the Tang dynasty when it came to foreign conquests, and it was also the method that the Tang dynasty used to protect itself against foreign experts. Chonga, no matter what happens next, you must not get close. This is a battle between us and Huishu Wizang. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Wang Yan's voice was calm and steady, and it even faintly revealed some sort of awareness. Civil officials do not love wealth, but generals do not fear death. This was the understanding that every general on a foreign campaign should have. Huishu Wizang was the most formidable opponent that Wang Yan had ever encountered, and this was definitely not their first battle. But no matter what, Wang Yan would not cower. The more than 80,000 Tang dynasty soldiers would not make him cower. Father, Wang Chong stared at his father's back, his mind in agitation. His father had always given him a cold and harsh impression. He rarely smiled or showed any emotion, but this time, Wang Chong felt something completely different. My strength is still too lacking. I have to get stronger as quickly as possible. Father, be at ease. No matter what, I won't let you fight alone. In the howling winds, Wang Chong clenched his fists, his long hair dancing in the wind. Ever since his reincarnation, his strength had advanced very quickly. To an ordinary person, this was completely unimaginable, but in a battle of this level, he was still far too weak. There's only one way left. In a flash, a thought flashed through Wang Chong's mind. He remembered the Stone of Destiny's bane of all generals. No matter what Wang Chong thought, on the other side, Wang Yan and Huishu Wizang's movements attracted the attention of the entire battlefield. Wang Yan, are you still going to put up a stubborn resistance? A thunderous voice swept through the sky above the mountain, echoing throughout the entire battlefield. Huishu Wizang looked at Wang Yan, who was at the top of the mountain, and the densely packed generals of the Tang dynasty who surrounded him like stars surrounding the moon. Huishu Wizang had the ghost of a smile on his face. Up until now, no matter what strategy Wang Chong used, No matter how many losses he suffered in the early stages, Huoshu Wuzong did not care too much. Soldiers against soldiers, generals against generals. No matter how the people of the Central Plains viewed a war, to Huoshu Wuzong, a war would always be decided by the battle between the top forces of both sides. As long as he killed Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong, the entire Annam Protectorate would collapse without a fight. If the great general wants a battle, Wang Yan will naturally accompany you, Wang Yan said calmly. His rumbling voice resounded through the entire sky. His voice was not overbearing, but it had a tenacity and boldness that could not be shaken by anything. He was like a rock in the middle of a river, fearless in the face of thousands of huge waves. He was like a lush green bamboo, unbending in the face of a violent storm. Wang Gingji is indeed worthy of being the descendant of a general. Just this alone makes him worthy of being my opponent. A strange look flashed through Huoshu Wuzong's eyes. The breadth of mind and boldness that Wang Yan displayed was something that even he, a general of the Uzun, could not help but admire. If that's the case, then let's fight. With a clang, Huoshu Wuzong unsheathed his long saber and strode forward. Behind him, thick smoke billowed and warhorses neighed. The most elite guards under Huoshu Wuzong, along with all the remaining Uzun Iron Cavalry, formed an army of more than 100,000 and swept toward the top of the mountain. The atmosphere there was earth-shattering and extremely frightening. Up to this point in the battle, Huoshu Wuzong had finally mobilized his entire army. Spread out! A stern shout came from the top of the mountain, and in an instant, the army parted like waves. The 40,000 troops of the Tang dynasty that had not been involved in the battle since the beginning of the war also began to move. Buzz! Several dozen streams of energy soared into the sky. As countless people watched, a pitch-black horse like a dragon leaped down from the summit. Wang Yan took the lead, leading the countless elite generals of the Tang dynasty toward Huoshu Wuzong. Huoshu Wuzong was an Uzun great general. No one in the southwest was a match for him, and no defense line could stop him. To a supreme expert like Huoshu Wuzong, the steel walls that Wang Chong had erected on the mountain were like clay chickens and pottery dogs. Boom! Wang Yan stomped down, and several dozen Mengshi Yusang soldiers on the mountain walls screamed as they were sent flying like ragdolls. Just like the soldiers of the Tang dynasty could not stop Huoshu Wuzong, the soldiers of the Uzun and Mengshi Zhao could not stop Wang Yan. Retreat. Chapter 606. This battle drew the attention of countless people. Uzun, Mengshi Zhao, and countless generals of the Tang dynasty all looked over. This battle that had yet to begin was even more important than their own battle. Boom! The wind howled, and dust billowed, filling the world. In the deepest part of the dust, a purplish-green saber energy tore through the void. It was 100 zhang long, cleaving through the void as it slashed toward Wang Yan and the others on the mountain. Wherever the saber energy passed, huge black cracks appeared in the air. This saber energy caused everyone's expression to change. In the entire Annam Protectorate, whether it was Luoji or Chen Shusun, they were all insignificant before this saber energy. This was not something that any general could block. Buzz! In the blink of an eye, just as Huoshu Wuzong attacked, the mountain suddenly changed. Rumble! As countless people watched in shock, the halos of Wang Yan and the several dozen generals of the Tang dynasty flashed. The halos suddenly blazed with light, and in the blink of an eye, they merged into one, transforming into a giant golden-armored god that stood up from the mountain. Mighty miracle god! Wang Chang's heart surged, and a thought flashed through his mind. The Tang dynasty possessed several powerful formations that could gather the strength of other generals, or even an entire army, to form an extremely powerful existence. The mighty miracle god formation was one of them, and it was the most powerful force in the army under Wang Chang's father, Wang Yan. Wang Chong had only heard of it in the past, but had never seen it for himself. This was the first time Wang Chong had seen his father use the mighty miracle god formation. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out, shaking heaven and earth, and the entire mountain range trembled. Wang Chong gazed into the distance and saw that under the gloomy sky, the The mighty miracle god had joined his palms together and blocked Huishu Wuzong's earth-shattering saber strike. Without the slightest hesitation, the mighty miracle god raised his mountainous right hand. At the same time he blocked the saber strike and punched heavily at the place where Huishu Wuzong was. Before his fist had even landed, the tremendous force of his punch had already caused the air within a radius of several thousand feet to completely disappear. The earth rumbled and emitted bursts of unbearable rumbling, as if it would split apart at any moment. Just as Huishu Wuzong was about to perish under the mighty miracle god's fist, a brilliant golden light suddenly erupted, and an earth-shattering Buddhist chant rang out between heaven and earth. A series of inexplicable incantations rang out between heaven and earth. Right before everyone's eyes, a golden Buddha over 100 feet tall with scorching red flames rose from the ground where Huishu Wuzong had been standing just a moment ago. Boom! The golden Buddha that was over 100 feet tall raised a single palm to block the mighty miracle heavenly god's sure-kill attack. Boom! The earth crumbled and debris and rocks shot up into the air like a waterfall of several hundred feet. All of the nearby warhorses neighed in anguish as they were tossed into the air, torn to shreds by the stellar energies of the battle. The destructive power of the battle struck fear into the hearts of everyone who saw it. Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra. Huishu Wuzong has finally used it. In a place where no one could see, the great general of Mengshi Zhao, Duan Gichuan, stared at the golden Buddha over 100 feet tall, and a long-awaited smile appeared on his face. The Great Sun Buddha Golden Body Mantra was one of the supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple. In all of the Uzan Empire, only great generals could cultivate this technique. The great generals of Uzan all cultivated different techniques. Outsiders would never have the chance to see them, and this was Duan Gichuan's first time seeing one. The supreme techniques of the Great Snow Mountain Temple truly are formidable. Duan Gichuan subconsciously turned his gaze to another part of the summit. There, the newly appointed Anan Protector General was standing motionlessly. A large number of generals gathered around him. The only ones in the army that had not moved were him and Xinyu Zhongtong. The Annam Protectorate's Vajra God and Wang Yan's Mighty Miracle God were the two mountains that stood between the Mengshi Yusang army. In the defeat at Irai, Duan Gichuan had already seen Xinyu Zhongtong's Vajra God. The Vajra God was reputed to be the strongest formation of the southwest. If the person using it had been Xinyu Zhongtong, Duan Gichuan would definitely have retreated, but Xinyu Zhongtong's strength wasn't even 70% of Zhangqiu Jianxiong's, so Duan Gichuan naturally had nothing to fear. He couldn't do anything to Xinyu Zhongtong, and Xinyu Zhongtong couldn't do anything to him. This was why the two of them had bided their time and allowed Wang Yan and Huishu Wuzong to fight. Boom! While Wang Yan's army was fiercely clashing with Huishu Wuzong, the sounds of fighting came from another direction. Wang Chong turned his head and saw that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were using this chance to surge up the mountain. Daluan Ruozhen. Wang Chong's pupils constricted, and as he looked through the air, he saw a familiar figure in the dense army at the base of the mountain, dressed in an azure robe and holding a feather fan. It was none other than Daluan Ruozhen. Only Daluan Ruozhen could use this chance to draw the attention of Wang Yan and Huishu Wuzong to launch an attack. The army of hundreds of thousands was like a vast sea, and in the blink of an eye, a powerful pressure washed over them. As expected, this was where Daluan Ruozhen was primarily attacking. He had used the direction of his father and Huishu Wuzong as bait. Wang Chong could smell danger. All soldiers, listen up. Get into position. Archers, get ready. Wang Chong's loud voice resounded across the entire battlefield. Following Wang Chong's voice, the entire mountain peak suddenly fell silent. All the soldiers and generals seemed to have frozen in place, and an austere aura soared into the sky. What no one knew was that Wang Chong's myriad stars formation had already started to operate. Although it wasn't a complete state and was only in its embryonic form, in Wang Chong's hands, it was enough to display a portion of its combat power. Prime Minister. At the base of the mountain, an elderly Uzan elder stood together with Daluan Ruozhen with a worried expression. This was a tribal elder of the Uzan Plateau. Whenever the Uzun went to war, there would occasionally be a few wise tribal elders who would follow him. Wang Chang's commands had left a deep impression on this elder, and it had also made him wary of the Tang dynasty youth on the summit. There's no way out. Wang Zhongxi is already on his way to Longxi. If the great General King also fails, Geshu Han will lead his army south, and our operation will be a complete failure. There are sacrifices in war, and no matter what, we must win this war. Daoism Ruozhen stood at the base of the mountain, his eyes shining with unprecedented resolve. At this moment, he didn't seem like a civil minister, but a fierce general. The art of war of the Central Plains says that we should multiply the enemy, and we have far more soldiers than they do. This is our greatest advantage right now. No matter what kind of military strategy he has, as long as we maintain our absolute advantage and continue to exert pressure on him, compressing his space, in the end, all of his military strategies will collapse. This is our greatest weapon to destroy them. This, I understand. Chapter 607. Boom! Without the slightest hesitation, the two armies crashed against the mountain like howling waves. This was the most intense clash since the start of the battle. Other than Jelifeng and Duan Gichuan, the rest of the army of more than 400,000 had been thrown into the battle. This time, Daoism Ruozhen did not use any tactics. He simply pushed forward, using his overwhelming strength to push his way up the mountain. When one's army far outnumbered the other, numbers became the greatest tactic, the greatest strategy. Kill! Kill! A series of earth-shattering shouts rang out, and the rolling black steel wave was enough to make everyone's expression change in horror. Ready! Ready! Forward! Wang Chang's voice resounded over the mountain. The first to attack was not the surging Mengshi Yusang army, but the Annam Protectorate on the summit. Swish, swish, swish. The first volley of arrows howled through the air, landing in the middle of this flood of steel. Bang! Like a boulder falling into a river, countless arrows pierced through necks, cheeks, knees, and bodies. Hundreds of Mengshi Yusang soldiers immediately collapsed to the ground, the flood of Mengshi Yusang soldiers immediately falling into disorder. Swish, swish, swish. 1 wave, 2 waves, 3 waves. Countless arrows rained down in a concentrated manner, and the chaos continued to increase. It's useless. When the number of soldiers reaches a certain level, local victories and defeats are no longer important. Daoism Ruozhen looked up the mountain, his eyes calm. In an army of 100 soldiers, if 100 died, it would be a complete wipeout. In an army of 200, if 100 died, it would be a heavy injury. In an army of 1,000, it would be a setback. And when the number increased to several thousand, or even tens of thousands, the effect would be negligible. The damage caused by Wang Chang's archers was insignificant to the army of hundreds of thousands. However, Daoism Ruozhen had still underestimated Wang Chang's strategic intentions. As waves of arrows rained down, Wang Chong immediately activated the myriad stars formation when the hundreds of thousands of black steel torrents were thrown into disorder and revealed a slight flaw. The tens of thousands of soldiers of the Annam Protectorate were like countless torrents of water, constantly crisscrossing, colliding, and crashing into each other like ropes as they charged down the mountain toward the Mengshi Yusang army. Congratulations to user for killing 12,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 33,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 88,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 34,000 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. In a few short moments, a string of voices poured out of Wang Chang's mind like a waterfall. Countless halos were clattering and colliding on the surface of the mountain. Attack halos, strength halos, speed halos, strength halos, defense halos, charge halos, hundreds of thousands of different war halos covered every inch of the mountain. The intensity of this battle had far surpassed anyone's imagination. Not even Wang Chong had expected it to be this intense. Wang Chang's myriad stars formation was like the sharpest of ropes, slicing apart the Mengshi Yusang army, surrounding it, and then constantly harvesting it. The Mengshi Yusang army was felled like wheat, and the data pouring down from Wang Chong's mind clearly displayed the severity of the Mengshi Yusang army's losses. Daluan Ruozhen seemed to have made the ultimate decision. He was using massive casualties to reduce the space the Tang army had to maneuver. As wave after wave of Mengshi Yusang soldiers fell, the other armies in the rear would quickly take their place. This method was simple, cruel, and extremely effective. After paying a heavy price, the Tang army's space to maneuver had been squeezed to the limit. At this point, not even Wang Chong had much room to maneuver. When faced with a fierce, valiant, decisive, and daring enemy commander who disregarded sacrifice and cost, even Wang Chong's art of war was no longer as easy to deal with. Against such an opponent, even Wang Chong couldn't help but feel a sense of solemnity. "Milord, we've paid a heavy price." The old chief found it hard to maintain his composure as he watched the soldiers fall in droves. At the base of the mountain, he could clearly see a bloody torrent cascading down from the summit. The intensity of the battle was beyond imagination. The earth of the mountain had already been dyed red by the blood of the soldiers. At this point, it was no longer clear whether this was the Mengshi Yusang armies or the Annam protectorates. "There's nothing to be done. This is a price we must pay." Daluan Ruozhen slightly closed his eyes. Not even he could remain calm in the intensity of the battle. The fighting power displayed by the Annam protectorate on the mountain had already surpassed imagination. Not even Zhangzhou Jianxiong, who had been in charge of the Ngari royal lineage for decades, had been able to force him to this state. But all of this was a price that had to be paid. Human wave tactics. This sort of Tang dynasty is truly too unsettling. If the Tang dynasty has a few more talents like this, the Uzun will never be able to contend against it. Daluan Ruozhen looked at the summit, a sliver of unease in his heart. As the war in the southwest continued, not even Daluan Ruozhen realized that his original goal had changed from exterminating the more than 80,000 Annam protectorate soldiers to eliminating that Wang Chong who had appeared out of nowhere. In the depths of Daluan Ruozhen's mind, eliminating Wang Chong was a higher priority than even the Annam protectorate. But it just so happened that Daluan Ruozhen could not reveal any of these thoughts. Wang Chong's vigilance was far more formidable than anyone could imagine. Putting aside the fact that he was surrounded by layers upon layers of Annam protectorate soldiers, the slightest hint that Wang Chong might throw caution to the wind and flee if the situation turned for the worse. Having seen Wang Chong disguise himself as an Uzun soldier to attack Mengshi Zhao, as well as disguise himself as a Mengshi Zhao soldier to attack Uzun, Daluan Ruozhen actually had no confidence in being able to keep him here. Rumble! The battle was still going on. In the south, the gigantic mighty miracle god and the golden Vairocana Buddha were engaged in a fierce battle on the mountain range. A golden halo that resembled the radiant sun faintly appeared behind the Vairocana Buddha's neck, and behind him, a gigantic snowy mountain faintly appeared. This was a supreme technique of the Great Snow Mountain Temple being used to its fullest potential. Buzz. Stellar energy gathered from all around, strengthening the halo and the image of the snow mountain behind the dignified and divine Vairocana Buddha. Although the Uzun Empire did not have a supreme battle technique like the mighty miracle god formation, it still had techniques and artifacts that could borrow the strength of its soldiers. Even though it was of a much lower level than the mighty miracle god formation, it was still a powerful formation. Behind Huoshu Wuzong, highland steeds neighed miserably as they fell to the ground, and the usually ferocious Uzun soldiers also collapsed to the ground as if all their strength had been sucked out. At the same time, opposite Huoshu Wuzong, the Annam protectorate was not in a good situation either. Clang, clang, clang. The halo vibrated, and the auras of countless Annam protectorate soldiers visibly weakened. The mighty miracle god formation could not only absorb the strength of other generals, but it could also absorb the strength of other soldiers. This was also the reason why Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong were able to resist Huoshu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan through the formation. The battle in the south was in a stalemate, and on the other side, the battle between Wang Chong and Daluan Ruozhen had also entered a white-hot stage. Warning! 1280 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 2314 Annam Protectorate casualties. Warning! 3215 Annam Protectorate Casualties. Warning. 3847 Annam Protectorate Casualties. A string of warnings rang out in Wang Chang's mind. Daoism Ruozen's strategy had finally begun to show results, and Wang Chang's Annam Protectorate was beginning to suffer heavy casualties. This was a contest of wills, and the effects of strategy were becoming extremely small. Daoism Ruozen's Mengshi, Yusang army continued to surge up the mountain. No matter how much resistance they encountered, it seemed like they would never stop. No matter how many casualties there would always be more soldiers surging up the mountain. But the 40,000 soldiers commanded by Wang Chong displayed a different side. They were callous and calm, like a rock before the raging waves. No matter how many Mengshi Yusang soldiers surged forward, they would never retreat. Whether it was Wang Chong or Daoism Ruozen, both sides had suffered heavy casualties. Cavalry, mount your horses. At the most intense moment of the battle, Wang Chang's eyes flashed as he suddenly mounted the white-hoofed Shadow's horse. Behind him, war horses neighed as one powerful Tang dynasty cavalry after another leaped onto the summit. Clang. Without the slightest hesitation, Wang Chong unsheathed his Wuzi steel sword. Lin Wushou, I'll leave the command to you. The white-hoofed Shadow let out a heaven-shaking neigh as it led the 2,000-some Tang dynasty cavalry down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. At this point, all of the Tang dynasty's reserves had been used up. Rumble. No one could describe the impact Wang Chang's 2,000-strong cavalry had inflicted on the Mengshi Yusang army. Wang Chong had chosen precisely where the Mengshi Yusang army was lacking in soldiers, its weakest point. The rapid charge of the cavalry, the amplification of the terrain and the halo of Dusk Stallion had transformed Wang Chang's 2,000-strong cavalry into the sharpest blade, piercing through the entire Mengshi Yusang army. Rumble. The entire mountain was thrown into chaos. Wang Chang's myriad stars formation had already been exerting a constant pressure, but Wang Chang's 2,000-strong cavalry had become the straw that broke the camel's back. Screams resounded from the summit as the Mengshi Yusang army fell into chaos. Wang Chang's myriad stars formation pushed forward, and countless Uzun and Mengshi Zhao soldiers fell to the ground. Congratulations to user for killing 78615 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 86135 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 91543 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. Congratulations to user for killing 98712 Mengshi Yusang soldiers. A string of voices washed over Wang Chang's mind like a waterfall, and when all the voices reached their peak, something completely unexpected occurred to Wang Chong. Congratulations to user for killing more than 200,000 foreign soldiers. The conditions for advancement have been met, and the bane of the battlefield halo has been upgraded to the 3rd level. Chapter 608. No one could describe the transformation that had taken place at this moment. Metal clanged against metal as the intense battlefield suddenly fell silent. More than half of the tens of thousands of war halos instantly dimmed, like extinguished candles. Some of the heavily injured Mengshi Yusang soldiers even dropped below the true martial realm under the effects of the bane of the battlefield halo. Damn it! What's going on here? The Mengshi Yusang soldiers were stunned as if they had seen a ghost. The drop of strength from the true martial realm to the origin energy realm was a massive transformation. It was like a muscular man capable of lifting up a mountain had suddenly become a child without the strength to truss a chicken. The difference was extremely obvious. The effects of the bane of the battlefield halo reaching the 3rd layer were so great that even some of the generals revealed shocked expressions. They were the most sensitive to the changes in their surroundings. Damn it! It's that foul brat again. Countless gazes converged on the summit, and even Jelifeng couldn't help but raise her eyebrows. Wang Chang's existence had already become the greatest variable in the War of the Southwest. His influence was no longer limited to 1 or 2 soldiers or commanders, but to the outcome of the entire battlefield. How could there be such a halo in this world? Why have I never heard of it before? Jelifeng, Duan Gichuan, and Daoism Ruozhen all had the same thought. But regardless of what they were thinking, Wang Chang's Bane of the Battlefield Halo's third layer was already producing an avalanche of effects. The Mengshi Yusang army on the surface of the mountain was thrown into chaos, and this effect was even affecting Huoshu Wuzong and the Uzun soldiers behind him. Huoshu Wuzong had been using the secret arts of the Great Snow Mountain Temple this entire time to absorb the strength of the Uzun soldiers behind him. When Wang Chang's Bane of the Battlefield Halo was applied to these soldiers and weakened them, even Huoshu Wuzong was affected. For a moment, he seemed to be unable to hold back the mighty miracle god. Damn it! Huoshu Wuzong's expression also changed slightly. He never thought that Wang Chang's halo could actually affect him. In such a high-level battle, this was very fatal. The thousands of Annam Protectorate soldiers used this chance to charge down from the summit, causing Uzun and Mengshi Zhao's armies to collapse. Just when it seemed like the Mengshi Yusang army was about to be completely routed, a massive boom came from the summit. Rumble! Dust billowed from the top of the mountain, and the huge commotion caused the entire mountain to tremble slightly. Not good. This direction. Wang Chong was charging through the crowd when he heard this voice. His expression flickered and he reined in the white-hoofed shadow, vaguely thinking of something. The top of the mountain was filled with the warriors of the Annam Protectorate. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be any changes there, and this direction was clearly, "Young master, this is bad. Uzun has sent people to destroy our water source." A dusty horseman charged down the mountain like a bolt of lightning. Before the horse had even come to a stop, a pale-faced guard kneeled in front of Wang Chang's horse. What? Like a bolt of lightning from a clear sky, Wang Chang's entire body swayed as if he had been plunged into an icy cavern. Daoism Ruozhen. Wang Chong turned his gaze to Huoshu Wuzong at the base of the mountain. I've been tricked. This was the only thought in Wang Chang's mind. As if confirming Wang Chang's conjecture, a resounding yak horn suddenly blared from the camp at the base of the mountain. At this moment, Daoism Ruozhen finally gave the order to retreat. Take me there. With no time to think, Wang Chong turned his horse around and followed the guard up the mountain. On the mountain slope, the Annam Protectorate was chasing after them. However, Wang Chang's attention had already shifted to another place. Young master looked. At the back of the mountain, a cave had completely collapsed. Countless water sources flowed down the mountain like a waterfall. Uzun's people used a boulder to reach here. They smashed the cave and dug out the water stored inside. They even poisoned the water. The guard explained with a pale face. Wang Chong turned his head and saw the boulder that the guard was talking about not far away. You're saying that they fell from the sky on a boulder and landed here? Yes, young master. Wang Chong instantly fell silent. Falling from the sky on a boulder was simply wishful thinking. Even if they landed safely, they would definitely be severely injured. These are men of sacrifice. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind. To use this method to transport soldiers, Wang Chong had to admit that Daoism Ruozhen's method was something that he had never thought of. Without a doubt, these soldiers were prepared to die on the mountain peak. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong's eyes scanned the surroundings and indeed found a few corpses. The mountain peak is filled with our people. When we discovered these people, we had already taken action. Unfortunately, it was still too late. The guard said with a face full of shame. There are a total of 17 water sources on the mountain. How many of them have been contaminated like this? A total of 8. Wang Chong's face darkened. His heart suddenly felt heavy. By now, he had completely understood Daoism Ruozhen's scheme. A frontal battle was not his goal. Even Huoshu Wuzong's attack was just bait. His true goal was the water sources on the mountain. To use hundreds of thousands of soldiers as chess pieces, Wang Chong had to admit that he had underestimated the resolve, capability, and charisma of this Uzun Prime Minister. I've been underestimating him all along. No wonder a civil minister like him could stand on equal footing with Xianxia Jianxiong, Jelifeng, and Huoshu Wuzong in the southwest. Xianxia Jianxiong has always been ambitious and has always wanted to achieve something in the southwest, but in the end, he achieved nothing in the past decade. So that's why, Zhangzhou Jianxiong had always been known as the Tiger of the Empire, but in the capital, be it the prestigious clans or the nobles, they all had some reservations about him. This was because his reputation was not proportional to his achievements. Wang Chong had also had this misunderstanding about him in the past, but at this moment, Wang Chong suddenly understood the situation Zhangzhou Jianxiong was in. Daoism Ruozhen was not the sort of person that could make others feel apprehensive and wary of him from the very start. Not only that, the vast majority of those who faced him would even think of him as mediocre and unworthy of his reputation. And Daoism Ruozhen's true attack would often come at this moment, a fatal blow that would catch one off guard. Water source. Water source. Wang Chong suddenly raised his head and let out a long sigh. Daoism Ruozhen had given him a truly difficult problem, and at this moment, Wang Chong had no other choice. At the base of the mountain, the armies of Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had all retreated, leaving behind a mountain of corpses. How is it? Daoism Ruozhen asked in concern. Although his strategic objective had been achieved, Daoism Ruozhen was not the slightest bit happy. Uzun and Mengshi Zhao had combined an army of nearly 500,000, commanded by imperial great generals like Hushu Wuzong and Duan Gichuan, assisted by him and Jelifeng, and supported by the logistical support of the entire Mengshi Zhao Empire. Yet in the end, they had still been forced to rely on their advantage in numbers and sacrifice. This was simply unimaginable to Daoism Ruozhen. Wang Chong had relied on his inferior army to force this prime minister of the Ngari royal lineage, whose name resounded throughout the Uzun plateau, into desperate straits. 123,400. The messenger accurately read out a number. Buzz. Even though he had mentally prepared himself, upon hearing this number, Daoism Ruozhen still couldn't help but feel his heart sink. Of the more than 400,000 soldiers of the Mengshi Yusang army, more than 120,000 had died in this battle, more than a quarter of their strength. This was an unbearable weight. This number far surpassed Daoism Ruozhen's bottom line. How could there be so many? Is this number accurate? Daoism Ruozhen said, his complexion unsightly. Replying to Prime Minister, we've already counted 5 times. The messenger lowered his head. How many soldiers did the Tang dynasty lose? It's impossible to count, but I estimate the death toll to be between 23,000 and 24,000. Daoism Ruozhen closed his eyes, unable to speak for a long time. Pass on my order to have the entire army prepare. In addition, have great General Hushu Wuzong accompany me to see the commander of the Tang dynasty. Young master, look down the mountain. There's activity. On the summit, Eagle's sharp eyes suddenly pointed down the mountain. Wang Chong's brow creased as he stood up. The battle has only just ended. What does he want to do now? Young Master Wang, can we meet and have a chat? A resonant voice came from the base of the mountain. From the summit, one could see the dense ranks of the Mengshi Yusang army parting like a wave, and the figures of Daoism Ruozhen and Hushu Wuzong were once more reflected in everyone's eyes. But unlike the first time, Daoism Ruozhen and Hushu Wuzong's expressions were a little less relaxed and carefree, a little more solemn and respectful. We've already come this far. Does the great minister still want to play any tricks? Wang Chong circulated his energy through his dantian, his eyes bright as he fearlessly looked down the mountain. Young master is too serious. In front of young master, how could Ruozhen possibly play any tricks? Daoism Ruozhen sincerely said. Young master has already seen the result of this battle. The Annam Protectorate's water supply will not last more than 3 days. For the sake of Uzun, for young master's sake, and for the sake of the Annam Protectorate, Daoism Ruozhen wishes to sincerely discuss a matter with young master. Just what does this Daoism Ruozhen want to do? This time, even the recuperating Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong couldn't help but look at each other in dismay, their brows furrowed. They had been fighting with the Mengshi Yusang army for more than a month now, but Daoism Ruozhen's attitude had always been aggressive and unrelenting. This was the first time the two had seen such a humble and modest attitude in front of Daoism Ruozhen. There's no need for Prime Minister to worry about the matter of the water supply. Prime Minister, if you have something to say, just say it. Wang Chong calmly said. Young Master Wang, I will say the same thing again. If the Annam Protectorate and Young Master are willing to surrender, I can guarantee that Young Master and all the warriors of the Annam Protectorate will receive appropriate treatment. Although we cannot allow Young Master and the warriors of the Annam Protectorate to return to the Tang Dynasty, Young Master and all the warriors will be able to live out the rest of their lives on the Uzun Plateau. No one will be harmed. This is the best outcome for Young Master and for our Uzun. I hope that Young Master can seriously consider this. This way, we can avoid many unnecessary sacrifices. With these final words, Daluan Ruozhen put down the feather fan in his hand and looked at Wang Chong on the summit, his expression incomparably sincere. The entire battlefield was deathly silent. Jelifeng, Duan Gechuan, and Huoshu Wuzong, these titans of the southwest who should have been vehemently opposed, all chose to remain silent at this moment. The strong would only respect the strong. In this battle, the casualties of the Mengshi, Yusang army had even surpassed those of the Annam Protectorate. These titans of the southwest had never imagined this. The summit was quiet, everyone waiting for Wang Chong's reply. Chong, make your own decision. Young Master Chong, there's no need to feel apprehensive. Right now, you are the highest commander of the Annam Protectorate. Whether it's war or peace, Young Master can make his own decisions. At the same time, Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong spoke at Wang Chong's ear. They did not speak too much, but the two had used their actions to fully express their support for Wang Chong. In the breeze, Wang Chong grinned and raised his head. Was this a very difficult choice to make? At this stage of the Southwestern War, it was already a battle to the death. There was no other path of retreat or choice. The Tang Dynasty could not lose, the Annam Protectorate could not lose, and Wang Chong could not lose. And did Daluan Ruozhen really think that he had already won? Prime Minister, have you ever heard of this saying? Wang Chong looked down the mountain and suddenly laughed. What? Daluan Ruozhen's pupils constricted. For Wang Chong to still be able to laugh at a time like this and even have the leisure to mention other things was truly beyond his expectations. Whoever laughs in the end laughs the best. Daluan Ruozhen, Jelifeng, and Huoshu Wuzong were all flabbergasted. Jelifeng had a deep understanding of the Tang Dynasty, but she had never heard of such a thing before. Jai, you've been studying in the Tang Dynasty for many years. Have you ever heard someone say such a thing? Zheluofeng looked to the side at the bandaged Fenjie and asked in confusion. Your child has never heard of such a thing. Fenjie lowered his head. Everyone was baffled by Wang Chong's words. Prime Minister, until the final moment of this war, it's too early to say who will win. Wang Chong heartily laughed. Without waiting for Daluan Ruozhen to ask any more questions, he flicked his sleeve and left, vanishing from the summit. Chapter 609. Prime Minister, what does this brat mean by this? He's already at this level? Does he still have some tricks up his sleeve? Longkinba turned his head to look at Daluan Ruozhen. His battle with Sun Luye had consumed a great deal of stellar energy, and his armor was covered in scars, many of which had even been cut open, revealing the mangled flesh beneath. But even so, Longkinba had still maintained a vigorous fighting spirit. Daluan Ruozhen said nothing while Huoshu Wuzong slightly frowned. In the past, he might not have been so dismissive of Wang Chong, but he would have only given him a few more glances, just a few glances. But now was different. Wang Chong's battle halos could even have a significant effect on his Vairocana Buddha. And if what Wang Chong said was true and he felt that he could win this battle, not even Huoshu Wuzong could maintain his composure. Although he didn't care about Wang Chong's individual strength, he couldn't help but care about the outcome of this battle. After all, his mission as a general was not to defeat his opponent, but to win. Daluan Ruozhen, what do you think he means by this? To Huoshu Wuzong's flabbergasted gaze, Huoshu Wuzong actually turned to Daluan Ruozhen. My lord, do you really think that he can win? Longkinba called out, a look of disbelief on his face. It's better to believe that it's true than not. Daluan Ruozhen deeply creased his brow, a pensive look on his face. You've seen this brat's abilities. Although not every word he says is true, not every word he says is false. Moreover, at this stage, there's no need for him to use these little tricks. Pass on my order. All soldiers are to be on guard. In this period of time, have 10 groups of soldiers take turns keeping an eye on the Tang people. In addition, use kerosene to set up a campfire in the camp. All the blind spots must be illuminated. When the patrols go in and out, including Meng Shijiao's men, use the secret code. We can't give them the slightest opportunity. It had not been long since Wang Chong led the Tang people to disguise themselves as Meng Shijiao's people to attack Uzun. Daoism Ruozhen did not want to make any mistakes at this time. If they allowed Wang Chong to successfully raid the camp and snatch more water, the chances of the Uzun Empire's strategy failing would increase with every day of delay. Wang Zhongxi had left the capital of the Tang dynasty. The current situation was completely different from the beginning. Now Daoism Ruozhen was more anxious than Jelifeng. Yes, your subordinate obeys. As soon as Daoism Ruozhen's voice fell, a few Uzun messengers quickly received the order and left. General, what should we do now? On the other side, in a tent far away from Uzun's people, no one expected that two figures were gathered together. One was the ruler of Meng Shijiao, and the other was the general of Meng Shijiao. At this time, even Crown Prince Feng was excluded and had no chance to meet them, let alone others. Your Majesty, you have seen the fighting power of the Tang people in today's battle. If we attack them by force, I'm afraid that we will suffer heavy losses. Even if we succeed, we will have to pay a huge price. The loss outweighs the gain. Daoism Ruozhen has already destroyed their water source. On this point, Daoism Ruozhen and I have the same view. Let's call a truce for 3 days. Although we don't have much time left, we have to wait. Duan Gechuan's voice came from the tent. The only general of Meng Shijiao had been hiding behind the scenes and was a man of few words. It was not until now that it was revealed that the real commander of this battle was actually Duan Gechuan, not Jelifeng. The key is the youngest son of the Wang family. If not for him, we would have won long ago. Jelifeng said. Now, whenever she thought of that boy, the youngest son of the Wang family, Jelifeng felt like there was a thorn in her back, and she couldn't even swallow her food. In terms of strength, for a strong warrior like Jelifeng, a warrior like Wang Chong was completely like an ant, not even qualified to carry his shoes. If it were any other place, Jelifeng could easily crush him to death. However, what Wang Chong was best at was not martial strength, but the most important thing on the battlefield, the art of war. Moreover, when the two armies fought, the barrier was clear. Wang Chong stood at the top of the mountain, surrounded by an impenetrable wall. Who knew how many experts were protecting him, including Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong? Therefore, no matter how much Uzun and Meng Shijiao wanted to kill him, even the intelligent Daoism Ruozhen couldn't do anything to him. It wasn't that easy to behead the enemy's commander. Don't worry, in the final battle 3 days later, when the Annam Protectorate is completely wiped out, that youngest son of Wang Yan naturally won't be able to escape. Duan Gechuan said calmly. Did you see anything today, General? Zhou Yuofeng hurriedly asked, his heart thumping. Although it hasn't reached the level that your Majesty thinks, it's not far from it. Duan Gechuan nodded. Although the Wang family's attainments in the art of war are unimaginable, even Zhangzhou Jianqiong can't compare to him. However, he isn't the true commander of the Annam Protectorate, and the Annam Protectorate wasn't personally trained by him. To be able to raise the fighting strength of the Annam Protectorate to this level in such a short time is already impressive enough. However, there are some flaws that can't be fixed no matter what. Duan Gechuan said calmly. An astonishing light flashed across his eyes, but it quickly dimmed, and everything returned to silence. The tent also returned to silence. This day was equally difficult for Uzun, Meng Shijiao, and the Tang dynasty. Chapter 610. The Eagle, do you still remember Li Sai? Wang Chong said no more, turning his head to the eagle. Bang! The name, Li Sai, made the eagle shiver like a bolt of lightning. Like the dark clouds in the sky scattering, The eagle seemed to remember something, and his expression became excited. Li Sai. That's right, how could he have forgotten Li Sai? When they had set out from the capital, the young master had far more people at his side. This was the young master's #1 general. Now that he thought about it, before they had even reached the Arai plains and met up with the old master, Li Sai had led an army and been dispatched by the young master to carry out another mission. But after so many fierce battles and so much time had passed, even he had forgotten about Li Sai's army. Young master, you mean, Wang Chong earnestly nodded. The one with the most schemes wins and the one with the least loses. Since Uzun has the ambition of a wolf and wants to use the strength of Mengshi Zhao and Jelifeng to deal with the Tang dynasty, he can't blame me for dealing with him. Since he wants to break off relations with the Tang dynasty, he should be prepared to break off relations. To Daoism Ruozhen and Huishu Huizong, war might only be a battle in front of them, victory or defeat in a decisive battle, but to me, it has never been so. As Wang Chong spoke, his eyes shone with an unprecedented radiance. The Tang dynasty had flaws, the Annam Protectorate had flaws, but did Uzun not have any? Success was due to scoundrels, and failure was due to scoundrels. Daoism Ruozhen had focused all his attention on his own weaknesses, but he had no idea that they also had massive weaknesses, even more severe than his own. It's about time. There should be a result by tonight at the latest. Under everyone's dumbfounded gazes, Wang Chong stood up, looked towards the west, and said something that no one understood. Strategizing in a tent, deciding victory from 1,000 miles away. Whether it was his father or Xinyu Zhongtong, neither of them understood that the true outcome of this war would not be decided here. It wasn't even determined by this battlefield. Even Daoism Ruozhen didn't know that he had set up another battlefield for him. In contrast to this battlefield, on another battlefield, Uzun was utterly defeated. As for Daoism Ruozhen, he still had no idea. War was cruel. This was a fact that every general should know. However, the reality that Wang Chong understood was far crueler than theirs. Li Sai. The rest is up to you. A gentle breeze blew past. Countless thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, but he eventually calmed down. Bah! A sheep was bleeding on the plateau, its eyes filled with confusion. Around it were mountains of rotting corpses of cows and sheep. There were no wounds on the corpses, but there were black spots that indicated that they had died of illness. Black smoke billowed up, burning ceaselessly on the plains. Such a pillar of smoke extended far and near, all the way to the horizon. It was a scene of doomsday. Not far from the sheep, around a ruined tent, a team of black-armored cavalrymen with shining swords and sabers were surveying everything around them. At the very front was a 2-meter-tall giant. He was a head taller than the others, and he appeared exceptionally muscular. He was especially eye-catching. Sir, this is the 107th batch we've encountered in the past few days. Since 5 days ago, we haven't been able to find any herds of Uzun herdsmen anymore. It looks like we've achieved the desired effect. The plague has already spread throughout the entire Ngari Royal Highlands. What awaits them next is a huge disaster. Behind the muscular man, a cavalryman took 2 steps forward and suddenly said, "You can't bear it?" Li Sai said expressionlessly as he sat high up on his sturdy great Heaven-defying steed. Yes. The cavalryman who spoke gritted his teeth and nodded. Behind him, the group of cavalrymen had the same expression. They were all elites who had been selected from the various clans. They were originally prepared for the battlefield for their clans. Although they hadn't entered the army yet, they had already considered themselves to be pure soldiers. If they were fighting on the battlefield, they wouldn't complain even if they died. However, after such a long period of time, what they had been doing was completely different. Even if they were pure warriors who thought highly of themselves, they still wouldn't do such a thing. As elite soldiers, they had only been doing one thing during this period of time, and that was to slaughter cows, sheep, herdsmen, and spread the plague. You guys, are all of you the same? Li Sai turned around and looked at the elite cavalrymen behind him. Everyone lowered their heads. They had the same thought. Sir, aren't you the same? One of the cavalry leaders mustered up his courage and said. Li Sai instantly fell silent. This cavalryman was right. He had indeed doubted it before, and he had also felt a bit of pity. Moreover, unlike the cavalryman behind him, he was not only a regular soldier, but also a general of the regular army. A pure soldier was his definition of himself. But soon, Li Sai's eyes became clear. If it was before, I would definitely think the same as you. Li Sai's voice was loud and clear. His first sentence attracted everyone's attention. However, have you forgotten who we are? Soldiers. It doesn't matter who you were before. Now that you've entered this place and entered the battlefield, you are soldiers, pure soldiers. You represent others, not yourselves, but the Tang dynasty. Let me ask you, what is the most important thing for a soldier? Is it glory? The group raised their heads and stared blankly at Li Sai. The most important thing for a soldier, of course, was glory. Was that not the case? Sir, are you saying something wrong? Another cavalryman asked. Li Sai shook his head, but he remembered what Wang Chong had said to him in the brocade pouch. At that time, he didn't think much of it and even mocked him. But now, Li Sai didn't think like that. You're wrong. The most important thing for a soldier is to obey orders and be loyal to the Tang dynasty. When each of you steps onto the battlefield, your personal will, your honor and disgrace will become insignificant. If the Tang dynasty fails, even if you preserve your glory and die gloriously on the battlefield, what's the use? If the territory of the Tang dynasty is occupied by a foreign country, that would be the real shame. Compared to that, what are your feelings now? Li Sai said in a deep voice. His deafening voice stunned everyone. No one would have thought that the person who should have felt the most pity for him would say such words. But there was no one who could refute him. Yes, if a soldier died gloriously on the battlefield, but the war was lost, what meaning was there in the greatest honor? Moreover, the southwest right now, it really had reached the point where Uzun and Mengshizhao had invaded the territory of the Tang dynasty. For a moment, everyone was silent. Soldiers, once on the battlefield, should no longer have personal honor or disgrace, personal will, personal gains or losses. None of these thoughts should exist. Our goal has never been personal glory, but to defend the Tang dynasty, to defend the empire behind us. Have you ever thought, if the southwest is lost and Mengshizhao and Uzun occupy that place, what sort of scene will you see? What do you think they will do to the people of the Tang dynasty in the southwest? When the time comes, will they show mercy and pay attention to the glory of a soldier? Let me tell you, if we cannot win the war when you return to the southwest, the scene will be exactly the same as here, and even more wretched. Li Sai's voice grew louder and louder, more and more intense. When the surrounding soldiers heard Li Sai's words, they all raised their heads in shock. They had never seen Li Sai so agitated before, but no one could refute his words. Correct. If this war was lost, the southwest would become a slaughterhouse for Uzun and Mengshizhao. Whether it was to establish their own prestige or to intimidate the people of the southwest into submission, Uzun and Mengshizhao would definitely carry out a merciless massacre. And the prolonged war and stalemate with the Annam Protectorate would cause them to vent their anger on the people of the southwest after the war. This was something that everyone understood. In this war, the Tang dynasty had no path of retreat. Milord Wei, a horseman, his face full of shame, prepared to step forward and say something. Suddenly, there was a clatter of hooves as a scout waved a flag and galloped toward them, dust roiling behind him. Milord! The people from the Great Snow Mountain Temple have caught up. Buzz! The atmosphere suddenly changed. Everyone's face revealed a nervous expression. Even the warhorses under them were faintly uneasy and kept sneezing. Everyone looked at Li Sai, who was at the front of the line. They've come so quickly. Li Sai sneered, his expression frigid. In order to deal with the Tang dynasty, Daoism Ruozhen and Hushu Wuzong had mobilized all the soldiers that the Ngari royal lineage had accumulated over the past 30 years. As a result, the Ngari royal lineage was currently empty. On the entire plateau, there were only a few herdsmen and scattered tribal warriors. In front of Li Sai and his Wuzi steel elite cavalry, they could not withstand a single blow. In all this time, Li Sai and the others had not encountered any decent resistance. However, the commotion that Li Sai and the others had caused on the Uzun Plateau was too great. This was not a war, but an unprecedented disaster. Even the entire Uzun Empire would be severely damaged. The consequences of the plague that Li Sai and the others had spread were so great that even the Great Snow Mountain Temple, which was thousands of miles away, was alarmed and sent out a large number of experts to hunt them down. In the face of these experts from the Great Snow Mountain, even Li Sai did not dare to take them lightly. Therefore, Li Sai had long sent the eagle to monitor them from afar. In addition, he had sent scouts everywhere to spy on them. On the boundless plateau, even the experts from the Great Snow Mountain Temple had nowhere to hide. They would often be discovered by Li Sai and the others from thousands of miles away. "Let's go." Li Sai patted the saddle and led the army at a gallop. It's about time to check the next silk sachet. Chapter 611. The news from the highlands came much faster than expected. Prime Minister, the quartermaster has sent word that we've run out of beef and mutton. In the tent, Daoism Ruozhen was deep in thought as he stared at the sand table. Suddenly, an Uzun general rushed in and knelt on one knee. "What's going on? Do you need to report such a small matter to me?" Daoism Ruozhen turned around and frowned, looking displeased. "Won't the tribe send food over?" "Prime Minister, the tribe hasn't brought any cattle or sheep over for more than half a month." "Oh." Daoism Ruozhen finally turned around and asked suspiciously. "What about the Luozli tribe?" The Uzun did not rely on just one tribe for logistics. There were at least 20 to 30 tribes at a time, and over 100 during times of war. The Luozli tribe hasn't appeared for more than 10 days. "What about Dhaka, Raylan, and Feki?" Daoism Ruozhen reported the names of several tribes. "We lost contact with them 8 or 9 days ago." Daoism Ruozhen creased his brow, vaguely sensing that something was wrong. This was not the first time the Uzun and the Tang dynasty had gone to war, and this sort of logistical problem had never happened before. Every tribe in the Uzun knew what food meant to the army. It was every tribe's duty to provide food to the army on time, so the Uzun would never run out of food like the Tang dynasty. It was strange enough for one tribe to fail to provide food to the army on time, but there was definitely a problem with so many tribes failing to keep up. "Send someone to the rear to see what's wrong." Daoism Ruozhen's eyebrows twitched as he suddenly had a bad feeling. "Report." Daoism Ruozhen didn't have to wait for long. Half an hour later, a messenger rushed into the tent in a panic. "Prime Minister, we've just received news from the highlands. An army of the Tang dynasty has rushed to the highlands and started a massacre. They've even spread a plague. Now, all the tribes on the highlands have suffered heavy casualties. Countless cattle and sheep have died." The herald knelt on the ground with his head lowered. He didn't even dare to look at Daoism Ruozhen. Large beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead and dripped down. "What?" Daoism Ruozhen's body shook violently. He grabbed the messenger and shook him violently. "What nonsense are you talking about? How could such a thing happen?" "Prime Minister, it's true. A member of the Jaeger tribe escaped from the plateau. I've already confirmed it with him over and over again, there is no doubt about it." The herald knelt on the ground. His face was pale, but his voice was incomparably firm. Every word was incomparably clear. "Those people killed their way into the highlands more than half a month ago. Moreover, they've sent people to seal off the passage down from the highlands. No news can be sent out at all. All the tribesmen who wanted to send news died on the mountain path. He only managed to escape with great difficulty. More than half a month ago?" Daoism Ruozhen's heart sank. Didn't that mean that the Annam Protectorate led by Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong was still trapped in Lion City? Wang Chong. In a flash, a thought flashed through Daoism Ruozhen's mind. He subconsciously thought of the young figure at the peak of the opposite mountain. If Wang Yan and Xinyu Zhongtong were both trapped in Lion City, then the only one who could do all this was Wang Chong. Daoism Ruozhen's heart suddenly turned cold. He took advantage of a loophole. More than half a month ago, Daoism Ruozhen's heart was still only Lion City and the Annam Protectorate inside. Meanwhile, the tens of thousands of reinforcements led by Li Jingyi in the north had already been defeated by the army led by Huoshu Wuzong. On the road south, there were layers of Uzun cavalry guarding it. Daluan Ruozhen had never imagined that Wang Chong would break through the Uzun's defensive line at this time and even send an army to kill their way into the highlands. The one who laughs in the end, laughs the best. Daluan Ruozhen's entire body turned cold. The only thing left in his mind was Wang Chong's last words. Following that, more and more details were dug out. Daluan Ruozhen's face grew paler and paler, his expression more and more unsightly. The situation on the highlands was much more serious and terrifying than he had imagined. Sheep plague. Daluan Ruozhen had never imagined that Wang Chong would use this method to deal with him. Not against people, but against the cows and sheep on the highlands. No one on the highlands would die from the sheep plague, but Daluan Ruozhen would rather Wang Chong deal with his own army. The people on the highlands could not do without beef and mutton for 3 meals a day. Even the highland barley was eaten with beef and mutton. Furthermore, unlike the Tang dynasty of the Central Plains, the cows and sheep of the Uzun were raised in large herds. Each tribe had hundreds of thousands or even millions of cows. Once a plague broke out, it would be an unimaginable disaster. Prime Minister! Prime Minister! A voice sounded near and far. Daluan Ruozhen shook his head and suddenly woke up. When he opened his eyes, the messenger was still kneeling on the ground, motionless and in the same position as before. Got it. You may leave. Someone, inform King Meng Shizhao that I have a request. At a time like this, the only thing Daluan Ruozhen could think of was Meng Shizhao and Jelifeng. Meng Shizhao and the Tang dynasty were of the same lineage. If there was someone who could solve the crisis on the highlands, then Daluan Ruozhen could only think of Jelifeng. What? Plague? Bonfires blazed in Meng Shizhao's camp. The torches illuminated the people in the tents clearly. After hearing the reason for Daluan Ruozhen's visit, Jelifeng's eyes were filled with shock. Even a mighty ruler like Jelifeng would never have thought that such a thing would happen on the Uzun highlands. Someone actually thought of attacking the hinterlands of Uzun and invading the highlands at this time. This news was like a slap to everyone's face. Wang Chong's military strategy was unconstrained and marvelous. It had already surpassed everyone's imagination. Great Minister, I understand what you mean. No matter what, as an ally, I will do my best to help you. However, our Meng Shizhao people mainly rely on rice, and we also eat pork. We don't have many cows or sheep to begin with, so plagues are even rarer. Therefore, when I first learned medicine from the Tang dynasty, this kind of unorthodox prescription for sheep plague was not on the list of things I learned. Not only that, I did not learn any of these unorthodox prescriptions. Jelifeng tried her best to be tactful. In fact, Jelifeng could be sure that even in the Tang dynasty, it was definitely not easy to find a veterinarian who could treat sheep plague. This kind of sheep plague was really too rare among the farming people. Understood. Then, Daluan Ruozhen thanks Your Majesty in advance. Daluan Ruozhen said, Your Majesty, bad news. The people of Uzun are fighting with our people. Just as the two were talking, a messenger from Meng Shizhao suddenly rushed in anxiously. Shua! In an instant, everyone's eyes turned to look at him. The food shortage in Uzun had finally caused a problem. Under the stimulation of hunger, the people of Uzun, who were known for their ferocity and belligerence, naturally turned their attention to their fellow allies, the people of Meng Shizhao. Due to the language barrier, a fight quickly broke out between the two sides. When Jelifeng and Daluan Ruozhen arrived, the commotion was quickly quelled. However, everyone knew that this was just the beginning. Young master, they really are fighting. At the top of the mountain, a long flagpole danced in the wind. Under the flagpole, the eagle and Wang Chong stood together, looking down the mountain. The eagle's face was full of joy, while Wang Chong was silent. Young master, it seems that Li Sai's strategy is really working. The eagle looked at Wang Chong said beside him. The eagle knew everything about Li Sai. Wang Chong had said earlier that if a fight broke out between Uzun and Meng Shizhao, it meant that the people of Uzun were running low on food. In other words, Li Sai's operation behind their backs had been a complete success. Wang Chong nodded. In the night wind, the two strands of hair at his temples danced incessantly. In the dark of the night, they had already stood here for a long time. From the top of the mountain, they had already seen at least 17 fights in the light of the fire. To say that nothing had happened between Uzun and Mengshi Zhao, Wang Chong would never believe it. War is cruel. Now it's up to Daoism Ruozhen to make his choice. The Annam Protectorate had been forced into a desperate situation due to the water problem. Now, the morale of the army was dropping. Wang Chong could clearly feel this change. But now, without a sufficient supply of cattle and sheep, the people of Uzun were running low on food. They were in the same situation as the Annam Protectorate. Now, there was no longer an advantage. It all depended on who could last longer. Young master, do the people of Uzun really not eat rice? If it's just food with the wealth of Mengshi Zhao, they can definitely provide a lot of food. The eagle suddenly thought of something and frowned. That's impossible. Wang Chong laughed. The eating habits of the people of Uzun aren't that easy to change. For example, if you only eat meat for 3 meals a day and don't eat rice, can you get used to it? Also, unlike us, the people of Uzun don't have the habit of growing rice. In other words, they have never eaten rice before. But, doesn't Mengshi Zhao still have pork? If it's just meat, can't pork be used as a substitute? Old Eagle hesitated for a moment. There are so many people in Uzun. 3 meals a day. How many pigs do you think Mengshi Zhao keeps? It's just a drop in the bucket. Wang Chong said calmly. The eagle was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. That's right. Pigs were different from cattle and sheep. Cattle and sheep could be left to graze freely in the wild, but no one would raise pigs like that. Therefore, the number of pigs would always be far less than cattle and sheep. With the wealth of the Tang dynasty, ordinary people could barely eat pork for a few meals a month, let alone Mengshi Zhao. Mengshi Zhao's habit of raising pigs was far from the Tang dynasty. Even if they could barely provide for Mengshi Zhao, how much could they provide? For how long? Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.